Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of my brand new podcasting series, Look Mom, I Made a Podcast. And in this series, I will be going through interviewing several different people all across the internet and in real life who might have just accomplished something big. So they might have made something that just impresses people and certainly caught my notice. So today's episode, I am very much excited to give to you my session I had with Richiban, the DM for the Pokemon D&D campaign, Dunsparce and Drampa. In this episode, we learn all about his history with both D&D and Pokemon, as well as the journey with him and his friends, as well as their experiences, and some behind-the-scenes information as to how some of the episodes of this amazing series have been formatted. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and you're probably in your car or something, so please keep your eyes on the road and don't relax too much, and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Look Mom, I Made a Podcast, the only podcast that can replace the same sensation as a parent's appreciation. So, this is the first ever episode, and essentially the idea for this whole thing is I go through and, there's tons of great accomplishments and art projects and things like that just being made all over the place. And, sometimes they kind of go under the radar and not too recognized. So, I want to go through and find those stuff, the jewels that I can find and go through that. And today we have the Dunsparce and Drampa podcast, along with Calyx Game Corner kind of included in that as well. Richie, welcome.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me.
No problem.
I have to apologize. I have a slight cold, so if you've heard me before on the podcast, I might sound a little different. But
the bonus features, you've never heard
exclusive.
Yeah, you've never heard Richie sounding so nasally. So this is an exclusive interview.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how are you today, other than being sick?
I'm all right. I just had a long weekend, which was super nice.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty chill day at work. We were going to actually speak of the devil. We were considering doing an impromptu Dunsparce and Drampa session, but our fairy type trainer couldn't make it, so we're going to stick to our normal schedule. But it almost happened, which was very exciting.
That's always fun. We always, sometimes it's always those unscheduled ones that are that's where the most chaos entails.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But considering even if you have a bigger size campaign, I mean, obviously you have the 4 players, which makes it even more crucial to have all the players. Otherwise, the whole dynamic is kind of flipped out the window.
Sure, yeah. That kind of, in my opinion, changes table by table. Different tables have different needs and expectations, but I think for the Quacko Packo, you kind of need everyone there. There's been some instances, there's been some arcs where someone had to be out for a while, and it kind of worked out, and it weirdly fit into the plot super well. But in general, we try to have everyone.
Yeah, it's always more fun. Also with that.
Yeah.
So I guess to start off, I figured I'd ask a real quick icebreaker that I'm not really sure where I came up with this. Maybe I heard it and it just stuck with me. But I love this one. If you were to go to prison, what would it be for?
That's great. I feel like probably for some sort of, probably like a, not to get too specific or deep into it, but likely for some sort of like resistance, some sort of like political resistance or something, or not even necessarily political, like maybe just even like defending a workers union or something, something picket line related. I could definitely see myself, when I care a lot about something, I tend to set aside, I feel emboldened to protect it. And so chances are, if something that I cared about a lot was challenged, I would resist.
That may be probably the best answer I've ever heard to this icebreaker, because I always get like tax evasion, the occasional murder, which I don't usually comment on that one, but I mean, I guess if you're allowed to.
Yeah, interesting.
But that's a really like respectable answer. Okay.
Yeah. Can I give a secondary one?
Sure, yeah, of course.
it would be for having a pet that's not allowed in my state.
Mm.
And I'm not talking exotic animals, but I lived in California for most of my life, and man, I really wanted a hedgehog, but they're
Oh, that'd
illegal.
be fun. Well, I
So
mean,
that's my cuter answer.
don't they have those like the hedgehog cafes over there? Maybe I
In
feel like I've
California,
heard
I'm
about
not
those.
sure. I'm not sure. I just know you can't own one in
Okay,
California.
I guess that makes sense. They're kind of not super exotic, but definitely kind of an oddity.
Yeah, it's not the. I think my understanding, if not to go on too much of a tangent, but
Mhm.
my understanding for California reasons is that they would be a terror to the ecosystem because
That
they're
makes
not
sense.
native to there, and like they prey on plants and animals that like don't have that kind of predation, and it would be very bad.
That makes sense. I could
Yep.
see that because I learned again. Hopefully, not getting too much of a tangent, but you know what? Tangents are fun. Um,
Yeah.
I did learn recently. I think it was like on a YouTube short or something that there's a specific law that you're allowed to own 2 snapping turtles, but no more. Specifically, you can have 2 snapping turtles. So if you want a
Well,
snapping
that's
turtle,
problematic if you have a male and a female, because then maybe
that is
you end up with more
problematic.
stuff.
But you know what?
Yeah.
That's a tomorrow problem. In this
Exactly, yeah.
hypothetical scenario, that's a tomorrow
Yeah.
problem. Cool. That's a great answer, and you definitely set the bar for anyone else I have the pleasure of interviewing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So obviously you're mostly here as the DM of Dunsparce and Drampa. So why don't you tell us a bit about the thing?
Sure, yeah. Dunsparce and Drampa is a actual play improvisational podcast run by myself and 4 of my friends as players, taking place in the Hoenn region of the Pokemon world, where the players play as Pokemon trainers. They're set about 15 years in the future from the events of Ruby and Sapphire.
Cool. Awesome. I've always loved the idea of Pokemon D&D. Like it feels like it should just fit really well as you know just the role playing aspect.
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon being a role playing game in itself, I think, playing the video games, especially as children, we like to picture ourselves as the trainers, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, yeah, any child who's played Pokemon before is like, man, I wish Pokemon were real, That is just what it comes down to. And in a lot of ways, this campaign for me has really been built up in my psyche since I was like 8 years old.
Wow.
Just yeah, just I a little bit of background. I was moving a lot as a child around the time that Diamond and Pearl came out. That was the only Pokemon generation I've always been a huge fan. That I just didn't play when it came out. I just skipped 4th gen.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have a DS. So there was this period from like whenever it came out in 2001 all the way until Black and White came out in like 2010, where I pretty much just played Emerald all the time. I would do like challenge runs for myself. I would restart the game constantly. I would do all these little things. And I spent a lot of time, and it was like the only video game I had for a while just due to my family's limitations. I would just like imagine being on the routes and in the houses and like talking to the NPCs and reading their text boxes. And I would think, oh, what would their voice sound like? What are they here for? I'm in, Petalburg City. What role does this town play? Why do people move here? Why do people want to visit here? And that just kind of expanded for every single element of the Hoenn region. And then it got to the point where, during the COVID pandemic, I was listening to a lot of D&D podcasts, and I was like, I have all these thoughts about Hoenn in my head. Why don't I just ask my friends if I can finally execute them very selfishly, kind of play out those childhood dreams in a collaborative community way? And it's been a real treat.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't expect such a because like the seed was planted for so long. I wasn't expecting such a such long ago kind of building up this idea. It's really interesting, but it does make sense.
I didn't know as an 8-year-old that I would implement it into a podcast. I had no idea. But those kind of storytelling seeds were there. I didn't even know if I'd get it into Dungeons and Dragons at that age. I hardly knew what that was about, but I think just the paths kind of aligned where it just made sense to give it a try.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot because that's kind of what D&D is really known for. Is like a lot of people I think got into it during COVID as well as just like it's an easy game that you can do basically whatever you want and can be done online. It doesn't have to be in person, but so there's a lot of variety.
It's the ultimate make believe, right? And when everyone's kind of suffering with reality, maybe the ultimate fantasy is the best thing for your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why everyone got into it.
Sometimes some escapism is a pretty good option.
I agree.
Yep. So I guess kind of going off the Pokemon thing, I kind of had a guess going into this. I feel like I'm going to be right. What's your favorite Pokemon?
As a lifetime fan, that's hard to answer. It kind of
Mhm.
cycles through like 10, depending on the moment. But
Mhm.
I think your guess is correct.
Yeah.
That it's currently Cramorant from
Mhm.
the 8th generation. So big Cramorant fan right now.
It's a good choice. It's a solid. It's just a funny guy.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I saw the reveal trailer like when they were slowly releasing Sword and Shield
Yeah.
info, and they just showed him on the snowy route, and they just all these stupid camera angles, and they showed him like putting stuff in his mouth. I was like, I love this guy.
That's yeah.
So yeah,
I- I've
ever since then,
I've always been drawn to like the oddities and the weirdos.
yeah, he's just got. It's all about the energy,
Oh, 100%.
Just a good
It's just
energy.
the blank stare. There's no thoughts.
It.
But you know what? That's okay.
Yep.
So I guess we kind of got because I have like my list over here and I'm like looking through like, all right, what have I talked about? So we kind of got the Pokemon and some inspiration. What got you into D&D specifically?
I think I played it a little bit in college. I had a friend who had played it with his dad for like his whole life,
Mhm.
and he offered to DM, and I said, "Oh yeah, like I love games. This seems like really fun to me." And I think my first game was a 3.5 campaign.
Mhm.
I did what many beginners do, which was pick a druid. And I don't know why this is something I've observed is that a lot of new players play druids. And I think it's a little too complicated for a new player personally. But if it's what you want to play, you want to play it. That being said, I had a hard time with the mechanics. Not to mention it's 3.5 and not 5e, which
Mhm.
is a lot more straightforward in my opinion.
So it's a lot more
That
newcomer friendly.
Yeah, it is for sure. And like streamlining make believe in a system where like you're kind of encouraged to change rules as you see fit. I think keeping it simpler is better, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Very subjective. But and then I played on and off different tables every now and then. But what really like got me like into D&D, like into D&D was during the pandemic when I listened to Dungeons and Daddies. It was that podcast where I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, like this is stuff you can do with it," because all the games I had played had been modules for the most part, which don't get me wrong, like Wizards of the Coast modules are fantastic and it's
Mhm.
way less work for the DM, right? But listening to like just the Dungeons and Daddies, it's so collaborative in the sense that it's the table of friends telling a story together, which you still do in classic D&D, but like it's on their terms.
Yeah.
And like it's so much more emotional and like visceral. If you have the ability to homebrew, I think it makes the connection with the players and their characters so much more just meaningful. And I think listening to that podcast is what made me want to host my own.
That's really interesting. Like, cause yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what you pointed out about most new players going druid, that hits me deep to my core because that's exactly what I did too.
Yeah. See, I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
And druids are great. They're good. It's just
they're
I
fun.
felt like as a new player that it was kind of a lot to take in.
It definitely was like because obviously it's supposed to be about like your stuff, but like when I did my first character, because at my heart I really just love storytelling, and that's like the main aspect that kind of drew me to D&D.
Yeah.
And I remember at the end of, gosh, it's probably like my junior year in high school. Like, it was the end of the winter semester, and they're just like, "All right, we're gonna have a little party. You guys can choose which of these rooms to go to, doing a different thing." And one of them was doing D&D. I'm like, "Cool, I've never tried that before." So I went in, and I was like, "I want to make the most backstory kind of lore-y character." So I made I think his name was Gorgle the Flightless.
Cool.
So he was an Aarakocra druid who went through some kind of like emotional trauma and has amnesia and lost his ability to fly. And then I took him to an actual campaign, and they're like, "Why would you take away the one useful part of that race?" I'm like, "Oh." So
No,
I just
think
never
that's
got
great.
to fly.
Yeah, no, that's sick though.
Yeah.
It adds so much intrigue.
Mhm. It's like, what do you think? But unfortunately, I was playing with a group of people who are not usually.
Min maxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
Yeah,
it.
a lot of them.
And that's valid too,
Yeah.
As I said earlier, every table wants something
Everyone's
different.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, and no shame in role playing.
And it was actually probably a similar inspiration story for me, because a couple months ago now, I started hosting my own Pokemon D&D podcast, like really inspired by your guys's. That yours was the first D&D podcast I ever listened to, period. Just because I was scrolling through stuff to listen to, and it was the first one that popped up. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting, so I listened to that. And then I binged all of the episodes, so at that point I think there was like 30 or 20 or 5 or something like that. I binged all of them in like 2 weeks, so
yeah,
got through all of that really fast.
That's so cool to hear. That's like definitely one of the craziest things about the podcast is and one of my favorite things is when people are like, oh, I'm doing this now because of Dunsparce and Grandpa, which is just so cool. It's just so neat to hear that. Just spreading the love of role-playing games. And especially Pokemon is the most profitable media franchise in history, and there's a huge fan base there. And a lot of people be like, oh, Pokemon and D&D, that sounds really complicated. And to be honest, it is. But I do want to be one of the podcast hosts out there to say it's possible. You can do it, and you can change the rules, and there's a lot of tools out there for you. And if it's something that you want to do, you're going to have a great time. So thank you for supporting, and I think that is very cool that you started your own.
Yeah, thank you. It's just such an inspirational moment because, like I said, I had thought about it before. I'm like, oh, there's what is it, like the I can't think of it. It's like Tabletop United with Pokemon. They have like a format for it, but
sure.
I tried with that and it just didn't really fit. But I remember I was going through Calyrex Game Corner and I found your example of like Absol, and I've applied that reasoning to every sheet I've made for Pokemon.
Yeah,
like I've just copied the PDFs. Like, all right, let's make a list.
Yeah,
here.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. There's a system out there called Pokemon 5e, which I would like to make a special disclaimer. When I was first setting up the podcast, I was asking a lot of questions to the creator of that system. He had done an interview with IGN or something. And I want to be super clear about Pokemon 5e is that he did get cease and desisted. A lot of people think it's from Pokemon. It was not Pokemon. It was Wizards of the Coast who said, you can't do this and we're going to sue you. That creator, his name is Joe. He told everyone to stop using his system. Even if you're not like, just like definitely don't share it, but also stop using it. So just so everyone's aware.
So PSA to everyone right now.
Little PSA, yeah, because I know a lot of people are still using it, and like generally that's like no one's gonna call the cops on you, right? But per the creator's request, I'm trying not to use it. So I had all these books, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna use these, so I'm just gonna change it and make it my own thing.
Yeah.
And I recommend that just for rules in general. Again, tables are different. Some tables love rules, like really hard and fast rules. Of course, you need structure for your game, but depending on who's running and what the players are like, you can adjust some things. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of just running what makes sense.
Yeah,
for your game.
Exactly, which I've definitely had to implement a lot of. It's just like because you never know what the players are gonna do, so you got to be ready to like. Sometimes the rules just don't really apply, and you just got to be like, you know what works. What works in this exact situation.
Yeah, it's always good to it's a open dialogue about it. If you as the DM are having a hard time figuring out how something should be solved, just open up the floor. Just be like, what do you think is fair? And I think you'll always navigate your way through a situation that way.
Yeah. One example that I'm not sure if it was on the fly for you or not that I remember was one of the characters in your campaign, Gimli, when he wanted to have his Boulder at the time rock blast his Torkoal forward to add more force, and you did like the synchronized rolls of roll 2 of the same and see how close they are. I've certainly used that actually quite a lot of like because we have a player with a Riolu who's constantly using like aura checks, so I have them roll 2 like d8s or something to see how like in sync they are, to see how much information is properly conveyed.
Yeah, so that is not original. I stole that from Dungeons and Daddies.
Oh, cool. Well, you know what? It passes down the pipeline.
It sure does, and that's I'll tell you what, that's what Anthony Birch would want, I think, from Dungeons and Daddies. There's the saying that good artists copy and great artists steal. I think in the RPG
Mhm.
space there is really no stealing. Just shamelessly take ideas. It's
It's
respectful to ask for permission, right? It's
Mhm.
respectful to reach out and be like, "Hey, is it all right if I like use this idea?" You know, I did that too. Not Anthony Birch. I think they're too popular. But
Mhm.
Boarding Party was the first Pokemon D&D campaign I listened to.
Mm.
And their DM Drew, before I started my campaign, I asked him some questions. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna like copy these ideas. Is that all right?" He said, "Brother, do whatever you want." And I'm reiterating that, and I think that's the true DM way.
Mhm.
Is yeah. But anyways, yeah, dice are cool. There's a lot of really interesting ways to use them besides just shooting for the highest number. I also try and implement every now and then something Call of Cthulhu adjacent, where well, sorry, my cat just made a bunch of noise. I don't know if you picked that up.
I picked up a
Um,
light jingle, but that was about it.
okay. Um, Call of Cthulhu adjacent rolling where like sometimes, especially for sensory checks like vision, sight, or vision and sight, the same thing. You know, sight, smell, touch, etc. That rolling low could actually be like a beneficial thing.
Mhm.
Like depending on what you are feeling,
Mhm.
you know, what the context is. If you are like reading an ancient curse but you are too dense to understand what it means, then maybe it
Mhm.
doesn't affect you. You know, something like that
Yeah.
is the idea. There's cool ways to use dice, and I think the combo roll is a neat one because the more and more experienced that they get with their combination, you can decrease their dice total
Yeah.
down to a D4 or even a D2.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I don't know why, but when you gave the sometimes rolling lower is better depending on the situation, the first thing that
yeah,
came to mind was like a toxic smell to see if they even
sure.
register that they actually smell it or something. Just
Yeah,
weird stuff. Yeah.
absolutely,
Again, the beauty of D&D, everything can happen at all. Yep.
exactly.
Again, going through my list. Did you have any hand in helping maybe design your players' characters?
No, not really. Not really. I really want it to be as personal for them as possible. Maybe some exclusive info for the Look Mama Made a Podcast listeners.
Ooh.
I do remember that Grace, the player of Elodie, the fairy type trainer, was torn at the beginning between a fairy type trainer who is a baker, who she is currently playing,
Mhm.
and like a kind of country girl farmhand with a Mareep as a starter.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I remember that we kind of talked through it about what we thought would be more fun. Um, CJ, who plays Gimli, the rock type trainer, he said he plays the same type of character in every TTRPG he plays, and that he would not change it. And I said, "Great, you can
Works
play
for me.
exactly that character." Yeah. And the same thing with Melissa playing Cindy, the fire type trainer. She's like, "I just kind of play the same character." I said, "Okay, do it." The unique one that kind of answers your question the most is Jacob, who plays Schmidt. In Dunsparce and Drampa, this is actually his first TTRPG experience.
Oh,
I
really?
think, yeah, I think that catches a lot of people by surprise. Just one, he's very natural at it.
Mhm.
Two, he is a huge RPG fan, like video games, more than probably anyone else I know. He loves all of the really intense like Xenoblade stuff that I just usually my eyes kind of gloss over. But he's cracked at those kinds of games, so I think he got the picture really quickly. But the actual role play element of like he's in control, um, was really interesting because at first he wasn't really sure what to do. So I
Mhm.
gave him a little bit of guidance. You know, he definitely designed Schmidt how he wanted Schmidt to be.
Yeah.
But as far as like stats and proficiencies and stuff, I talked him through what made sense.
Yeah. Which I think that actually like great point to end on with that, because that brings me to another question I had a bit later, which
Sure.
was recently through Dunsparce and Drampa was released a one shot DM'd by Jacob.
Uh-huh.
So I just wanted to ask, like, did you have any hand in maybe designing the story for that, or any kind of involvement there, or were you just along for the ride?
Fully along for the ride. It was something that Jacob said he wanted to take a shot at. We've been playing the game for over 2 years, going on 3 pretty soon, I think. So,
Mhm.
you know, he's had plenty of experience of me DMing. I know he like dabbled in Critical Role and other like Dimension 20,
Mhm.
other mainstream like TTRPGs. So I think he's got a grasp on it. He just had an idea that he wanted to execute, and he's doing a great job.
Yeah, it turned out really good. I personally, I don't like, obviously I can't speak for anyone else watching, but I personally I love that part. And like, so I was curious, what was it like to kind of go from, like you said, 2 pushing on 3 years for Dunsparce and Drampa, as the storyteller to now become a character in the story.
Oh, yeah, that's cute. I mean, the one shot is like not really connected. You know, it's all canon characters from Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess I can answer your question in a roundabout way. Playing is great. I love playing. Playing. I love DMing too. They're a different type of joy. DMing is a very kind of slow build joy that you put in a lot of effort and you watch it grow over a long period of time. And you know, it's that kind of, it's like raising a child kind of, right? And then in my experience, being a player has that for sure. But being a player is also kind of like drinking a soda because like there's no expectations. You know what you're getting into. You sit down and you play a fun game and then you say goodbye. You know, like you know your character, you bring your sheets, you have a responsibility, but it's not like DMing, right? Your question, being involved in the story, right? Kind of a roundabout way to answer that. So I do get to like have a little bit of expression. I do try and stay away from the DM NPC idea. And I try to, I think for the longest time companion, not too much of a spoiler, but for a good half of the campaign, the Quacko Packo was accompanied by an NPC named Symmetra, who I, didn't really intend to join the party necessarily, but the Packo just took a liking to them and they ended up traveling quite a bit together. And they weaved into the plot nicely, but I definitely did not want it to seem like that character was participating in the same degree that the Quacko Packo was. And I want to say that I think I did that successfully. When it came to combat, they usually just kind of did supportive stuff. They never went for the final hit, you know. And they also like really just developed alongside the Quacko Packo because again, they're an NPC, so there's kind of a generic idea of who they should be. And I guess I got to participate a little bit in character development, which was fun, but that's not really what I'm here for necessarily. So I think it being it's not my world, it's a shared world, it's a collaborative world, but having my little plot seeds and NPCs and stuff that I'm putting in gives me enough of a participatory element where I don't feel like I need to be a player, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I get that.
Long-winded answer for you.
Oh no, that's what we're here for. We're here for the juicy details. Okay. Answer in whatever way you find most comfortable. But yeah, that was So I guess a little. This is a good question. I guess a little bit of spoilers for Dunsparce and Drampa. But do you think that you being worried about Symmetra's assistance and impact on the campaign itself is why, again, spoiler, she's removed at a certain point? Maybe permanently, but probably not. Just removed from the main Packo.
A lot of people seem to assume that. I think if you continue listening, I have a hunch that other NPCs will come and go because the Packo just has this magnetism to them. I just to be clear with the audience, I did not remove Symmetra on purpose. The event that led to her either permanent or temporary removal was a natural one on a dice that I rolled. So it at the time that it happened, it was one of those prophetic dice kind of things where I was like, yeah, she has to go. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the dice decided it. So it's not like
Deoxys freaking killed her. She's just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see if her story is actually finished being told or not. But to answer your question, no, I did not remove her intentionally.
Interesting. Again, this is for the juicy details. That's cool to learn. Because it's like when I was planning out some of the stuff I wanted to ask, it's like I had to balance myself of I'm interviewing for a general audience, but also I'm interviewing as a fan of the show. So how do I not just like, all right, tell me everything?
No, of course. Well, that leads to better questions, I feel like. So thank you for asking.
No problem. So this is more of like a general kind of DMing D&D question, I suppose. This was one of the ones that one of my DM roommates came up with, which is how do you reward your players for creative ideas as well as punishing them for maybe problematic decisions?
So was the context for roleplay or was it for roles?
It could be both, whichever, either or.
So there's a lot of different philosophies on this. My general philosophy with running the game in general is what is the most fun. fun can be had in a negative way, if that makes sense. Not like fun is bad, but you can have fun when something bad happens to your character.
Mhm.
Um, so I definitely think that punish is definitely the wrong word for me. Punitive is not something I'm ever looking for
Mm.
in gameplay. I think disagreement can be expressed in characters on the table through roleplay, which is great and cool and fun. As long as it doesn't like affect above table vibes, do whatever you want. That's really my opinion.
Mm.
Um, if you can't have fun, what can you have? Is what
That's true.
it comes down to for me. Um, Obviously, there's inspiration for rewarding creativity. That's kind of a given. I do throw that out. A really good thing about doing a homebrew is that like people can't like look up and check how hard certain things are supposed to be.
True.
And so when things are creative, when I ask for a role and they describe it in a really great way, I'll just lower the DC, like because I think the way you described it was super cool, and like I think it would be very fun if it worked. And it's role playing in a way is like kind of a skill, And I'm not saying role playing in the sense that like you method act your character and you have a voice and everything. That
Of
isn't
course.
necessarily role playing. Just even third person description, doing that properly and well and in a fun and engaging way that tells a cool story. Yeah, I'll reward that because that's what it's all about. Critical fumbles is a little controversial of a thing. I personally am a fan. I like critical fumbles. I think they're particularly pertinent in a Pokemon campaign, which is just notorious for missing focus blast or
Yep.
critical hits, right? Like I think you gotta have those because that's what Pokemon's all about.
Part of the fun.
Yeah, like the part of the fun is the chance for failure, and in a weird, twisted way. That's just kind of how it works. But that being said, it's cool when a critical fumble has like additional consequences, right? It's not just like, oh, like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Because that is kind of lousy and boring. That is missing your focus blast. It's like, oh, instead it went into the wall and like broke a valuable piece of art, and now this NPC is mad at you or something.
Mhm.
I think that's more interesting and exciting. How I don't know how much you want to spoil Dunsparce and Grandpa here, but there was a controversial role in the episode somewhere in the 60s where Elodie explained something to a child, and I had both of them roll. I rolled Elodie for like the eloquence at which he explained it, and I rolled behind the screen for how well the child understood the instruction. And the action of the child as a result turned out to have extreme repercussions for a huge chunk of the campaign. For like 20 sessions, it was entirely different because of these two roles. And I think that's a good thing. And I don't want that to change because the kid rolled poorly and Elodie like didn't roll that well. And so it was literally a disaster. And that was kind of awesome. So I think failure is a part of life, and I think failure is a part of role playing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it reminds me a lot of the. I mean, it's like pretty much exactly what you described, but like the making role play the heart of the difficulty, essentially.
Yeah.
So because, like you said, based on how you describe what you're doing, that changes the DC. I know people who, when they're like, oh, you're gonna do a persuasion or deception, it really depends on what the character is saying. So like, you're persuading him to give you a discount. So I guess I'll just use your character again as an example. You bring up that you rescued their siblings' Pokemon several weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's exactly. Like it really depends on the stakes and like what's actually happening. Because if you just say give me a discount because I said so, that's not gonna probably work.
Yeah, it's all about the flavor, right? Because otherwise you could just be playing a video game, with the exception being like Baldur's Gate 3, where you actually have those options. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get it. It's like most video games that aren't Baldur's Gate 3.
Exactly. Which, again, each table to their own. That could be fun for a certain group, and they, more power to them.
Mm-hmm. So this is, I guess, like more of a personal into the campaign. Again, probably the fan in me influenced kind of base question. How did you come up with some of the ideas for because I mean we haven't really seen many new ones recently in the podcast, but some of like the custom forms being like as we mentioned how Cindy has the fire type Gudra, or there was like Alpha Ninetales, or like way back in the campaign. So how did you come up with those?
Well, I have a funny note on that after, so don't let me forget. I really am not planning them in advance. They're just kind of coming to it. I don't really know what to say. Regional forms are super cool. They're super cool concepts, and I think part of what makes them super cool is that they are limited. I think it's easy to kind of get carried away and be like, oh, I'm gonna do like regional forms for like the whole campaign. And of course, again, for your table, if that makes sense, more power to you. That doesn't personally interest me. I don't think it would interest my players if everything was customized.
Yeah.
I like kind of sprinkling it in like a little like, oh, this is something interesting and unique. Even when it's not like a whole new form, there's a specific flying type Pokemon that Schmidt possesses that is usually particularly fluffy and gentle. And I'm trying to flavor his as a little bit more raptorial, like a little more like fierce, even though it's still fluffy. So even little changes like that, I feel like give a lot of personality to the setting. What was your question? Like my philosophy around it, or like how I come up with it?
I guess philosophy would probably be a good one to look at.
Yeah, the thing with regional forms is that I like having a justification. I think Alolan forms did that particularly well. It's like, hey, listen, this Vulpix is on a snowy mountain, so they're kind of like a snow spirit, so they're ice and fairy type. What I was going at for Gumi was the first encounter of the campaign that was captured, which was really cool. It was a critical. I don't always do encounter tables having critical hits, but in this instance, a 20 on this route was a Gumi. And so I was just kind of thinking after it was caught, I was like, why is there a Gumi here? Gumi is from Kalos. So I started thinking, and I was like, well, Hoenn is home to a different type of slug and snail Pokemon. Could they be somehow related in some way? And then I kind of like, just thought about it a bit, and I was like, sure, yeah, there's like they share a genetic ancestor, so there's probably some sort of regional variation with Gumi. So that's how that came to be. I'm trying to think of like other regional forms. I just kind of diversified Oricorio. I feel like that one's kind of a shoe-in. I think anyone who saw an Oricorio, but that's not a bad thing necessarily, right?
I personally thought it was like a pretty fun addition that, it makes sense. It's not like it's a whole new Pokemon that we have to give explanation for. It changes depending on the nectar it drinks or how it dances or whatever. So who's to say it doesn't dance a certain way and becomes a different type?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely my philosophy on that. I think my last thing I'll touch on regarding that idea is something that really struck me as a kid playing through Emerald all the time, was that Meteor Falls was a different color than every other cave. And I was like, why is the rocks and gravel and everything just a different color? Why? What's going on? And so I had a lot of theories as a kid about why that might be, and I also thought about how that might influence a lot of Pokemon there. So if you listen to the podcast, there's a exceptionally different native Hoenn Pokemon that is in that cave. Not exceptionally different, but it is. It's an order of magnitude different, I will say. And so just stuff like that. I think the context is what gives regional forms their life.
That's true.
The funny thing I wanted to touch on is that you mentioned a couple instances that happened in the campaign. And one of is the name of Alpha to describe a Pokemon. Funny story. So I introduced an alternate form Zoroark, and I also introduced an Alpha being a form of a Pokemon before Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, which is very funny and also very annoying.
We thought Pokemon was stealing ideas before. They were stealing this too, and no one even knows.
No, I think it's truly just a coincidence. I described a silvery white Zoroark, which kind of ties in with Hisuian Zoroark. And honestly, if I want to, I'll say it here now, if I want to retrace and just call it Hisuian Zoroark, I think that's valid. I think based on the backstory I have for that character and like how they fit in the world, yeah, I think that the Hisuian Zoroark really fits.
Yeah.
The term alpha, there's a reason why I chose that word, and it might be a similar reason as to why that word is chosen in Pokemon Legends Arceus. I don't know. It's kind of too late to backtrack on it, so I'm just going to sit on it, and listeners are just going to have to be like, it's a different type of alpha. You're just going to have to deal with it. Yeah. So that one is more upsetting. Not like I'm actually upset, but more just people who are Pokemon fans might listen and have an idea in their head, and it's not necessarily what I was going for, but it's c'est la vie. Pokemon owns
Yeah.
the IP, so they can do what they want. It's fine.
You just now you get a cease and desist because you stole Alpha.
Yeah, let's hope not.
Let's hope not. Let's cross our fingers. We'll just keep moving on and we'll pray.
Yep.
Yeah. But you know, it's that kind of stuff that is part of the reason why people love the anime so much. Is there's always like Ash Greninja was a huge deal. So when you introduce a feature of this player can make her Pokemon go insane and stop a volcano by just absorbing heat, like that gets people hyped and gets people interested. Of just like, oh, they got like anime logic or something.
Yeah, something for me in storytelling that really gets to me that I couldn't put a pin on. You'll laugh at this because it is funny. Everyone I've told this laughs because it's funny. I've always really liked like reasonable is the wrong word. I don't know how to put it. I love it when power is portrayed in a way that is like really awesome and like too much, but not like so too much. And the game that made me realize this, which is the funny thing, is Final Fantasy VII. Have you played that game?
I have not played Final Fantasy. I need to though.
So I haven't played a ton of JRPGs, but I had to play this one. It was the original one, not the new 3D one. Although that looks cool, it's not really my style. The original Final Fantasy VII, I didn't play till I was an adult, and I always like loved this idea of power. And the iconic villain from Final Fantasy VII is Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And I usually hate that kind of character. They just remind me of Shadow the Hedgehog. They're so stupid and edgy, and just like you look at them and you're like, shut up. You know?
They're the ultimate life form.
Yeah. The way they like drip feed him in Final Fantasy VII, like to the player and like to Cloud, is like so scary. And I'm like playing this stupid game with PS1 graphics, and I'm like scared of this guy. And I'm like, how do they do it? Like, so that to me, that's really cool and potent storytelling. Another way they do it really cool. I'm going to spoil Earthbound really quick. Maybe my favorite video game. There's a moment in Earthbound where the protagonist, Ness, or whoever you name them, goes on a mission within their own mind to defeat like the embodiment of evil that's been plaguing them. This is a huge JRPG meme right here. But they do that and they conquer it, and then it treats you to like a solid like 2-minute scene of his stats all just rolling up. Just it's like increasing and like it's unbelievable. You're like, he's so powerful now, and it's like really cool and fun. So when I am trying to show power, and in these two examples, one is a villain and one is a protagonist, I like to do it in that kind of a way where there's a growth that's kind of implied, and it happens kind of slowly, and then like boom, there's a big moment where it's like, holy, this is crazy. That is, if you can't tell, I'm very animated about this.
Yeah,
it's
just I think
it's cool,
it's
and
great.
I think a lot of other people find that cool too. So I will cite those two video games as my inspiration for the Alpha Soul Eater in that particular environment, and it's probably going to come up in the campaign again just because I love that stuff. It just is so cool. So that's my answer for that.
That's so cool. It's always like, I mean, because it's like you said, even if it's a villain or the person you're playing as, either it's super intimidating or super, like, oh, I'm so powerful. But either way, both just usually make the player kind of beam and just like, this is a really big thing that's happening right now.
Yeah,
we should pay attention.
And it's funny because again, there's this line, and it's je ne sais quoi. I don't know what it is. But there's a point where if you do it wrong, it's Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to define that.
You don't want to make a character. You don't want to make a character that just has extreme plot armor that's just overly overpowered. It's like, I can't be stopped by anything. And because then it's like, what's the fun?
Yeah, because both Sephiroth and Shadow tell the protagonist that they're the ultimate life form.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, again, this is all opinion, the Sephiroth one is so much like cooler. I don't know. That's all.
No, I think that's a fairly common sentiment to like kind of be. Again, we're getting very far from D&D and Pokemon, but like,
yeah,
I think it's a pretty common thought to just be like, Shadow is just kind of in an odd place. It's just like too much power for no reason.
Yeah, and I mean, and that franchise is all about simplicity of understanding the characters, anyways.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's Sega's fault.
Yeah.
But I think when we are dealing with stuff like D&D podcasts, you can afford some more complexity and intrigue, and I don't
Mhm.
think Shadow a Shadow type character in a campaign like this would be great as a joke, right? They would be
Yeah.
funny. You'd be like, oh, like this is not serious.
Mhm.
So I think for Sonic he's serious, but the Sonic world is generally unserious,
That's
if
true.
that makes sense.
That makes sense. That does kind of remind me though of so I guess backstory into my Pokemon campaign is me and my friend Ryan, who we were designing it, um we really wanted to, because even though we're putting it as a podcast, we wanted to kind of really give the party members like a reason to get involved, like make it more personal. So we made
Mhm.
it so like every major NPC is a direct parallel of someone we know in real life.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
but it works in a way so like when people are watching, it's like, oh, it's just that random character, but for no reason the players are just acting a lot different around them because,
Oh,
but the obviously the viewers aren't going to know anything because they don't know the person. They're just like,
sure.
why are these people automatically hating this character for no apparent reason? It's like it's because it's someone in real life.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But part of that was the custom form thing, which it does go against what you said. So I was a little nervous to change. Whatever. It's we have a lot of like different custom forms that we were just like, it'd be really funny if we made a custom form based specifically around each main player. So they got like, this is literally just a Pokemon for you that we made in advance. Which is why I
Yeah,
kind of
that's sweet.
I wanted to ask beforehand, like if they had a type that they wanted to major in, quote unquote, so we could decide like, okay, for example, one of our players, he wanted to major in dark types, so we went through some stuff, and his starter is a like oddly decaying Lotad that eventually becomes a water dark Ludicolo.
Hmm.
Um, but part of it with him was before he knew that we were giving out like, oh, you could have a custom one if you wanted it. He had a Scraggy as his starter,
Hmm.
and then he shipped it off and decided to go with Lotad instead. So with the idea of like an overly powered character for comedic reasons, I now have the Scraggy show up at random times in the campaign, but he has such extreme speed and power that no matter what, he can't be caught before he's immediately out of scene.
Oh, interesting.
So like I have like, oh, roll a perception check for no reason, and it's like you look outside and you see a flash of orange. As you look out, you see this lizard creature stumbling over himself down the street. So I think
That's fun.
I think you're right about that. Like it is like it can be a really scary thing depending on how you do really powerful characters, or if you want, it can just be a really goofy thing. If it doesn't impact the plot, then you know what, make it goofy.
And you know what's really powerful about really powerful characters?
Hmm.
Is if you introduce especially like a villain early, that just seems insurmountable, and then the players beat it eventually. That's really potent. But to your point though, let me clarify. I don't think saturating your campaign with unique, new forms and stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, going
Yeah,
back, every table's different. Absolutely. Just I
exactly.
think I felt for myself in the Paco that too much would bog down the experience. But again,
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
everyone has a different thing going on with their table.
one
There's
hundred
no
percent.
right or wrong way to play as long as everyone's having fun. That's the only
Exactly.
requirement.
I think my players are having fun. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yeah. I think we kind of answered this one a bit before, um, with some of them. But how much D&D experience did your players have going into this?
Yeah, we can touch on that. As I said, Jacob, none, which
Mhm.
is really crazy how far he's come. Not, I don't want to like objectively rank players or
Oh,
characters in any
of
way,
course.
but I will say that Schmidt's character development in the podcast has been exceptionally profound, which I think is like related to Jacob's like familiarity and expression with the game format. Really, really cool. I'm really proud of Schmidt. I didn't birth Schmidt or anything, but just his growth is nuts. All the characters have character growth, but I think particularly Schmidt is just super, super cool, really inspiring. The other 3 players have had a lot of experience. It's just an interesting parallel. Yeah, they've all played quite a bit. They've only played more since we started. They've only been playing other groups and like playing Baldur's Gate and like
Oh, that's
other
awesome.
TTRPG style games. So everyone is much more involved than when we started. I probably have the second least experience, honestly, at this point.
Really?
So
Huh.
yeah,
That's really interesting because, like you said, it's not kind of the thing you'd expect, especially if you like actually listen to the podcast. Because I gotta say, from when I started listening, it like your style kind of immediately took me like, okay, he knows what he's doing. Like he has he
that's
has a
very
story in mind.
sweet.
No problem. Like I literally was
Um,
like, oh my gosh.
yeah, people are dumbfounded to hear that this is the first thing I've DM'd.
Oh wow.
Um, just in general. But I think that probably just speaks to one, I was consuming a lot of content. Like I binged Dungeons and Daddies, and
Mhm.
I did a bunch of other stuff too. And also, I had a very solid idea in mind for the type of campaign I wanted to run, and especially the exposition. I was like, I had that pretty much generally locked. You know,
Yeah.
the thing with DMing, people talk about railroading versus like sandbox,
Mhm.
and every table's different, obviously. For me, I'm kind of taking a tangent here, if that's okay.
Oh, 100%.
Uh,
Don't worry about it.
yeah, for me, my I have like a world which is just Hoenn, right, in the
Mhm.
future, and I have an overarching plot. And so the early sessions, I have like a lot of notes, and I'm like, this is generally what's happening. But then, like once I'm taking how to no what's his name, Matt Colville, there we go, my brain
Mhm.
just had to
Mhm.
catch up. Matt Colville's a really good like D&D content creator, gave a lot of DM advice I've picked up from him. He has a playlist called, I think it's How to Be a Great GM or something. He has a playlist on his channel that just has invaluable advice. um what I'm getting at is when they finally got their plot coupons, so to speak,
Mhm.
and then like they know what the overarching plot is. There's way more improvisation than people realize. It's a little embarrassing if you go back in my session notes. Almost every other session, there's just one sentence. It's like, "Don't forget about the turtle," and like that's my note. That's like it. And then the rest of it is just improvised because at that point the party has the draw. And I remind them sometimes too, is like I love the side adventures. There was that one episode where I was kind of stressed because I was low on notes, and then they just decided to go bowling. And they just bowled for like 2 hours, and it was crazy. And I think that's part of the beauty of D&D. And two, I remind them at those times, like, hey, you are ingrained in this plot, and you should know that while you're doing these things, and I support you doing these things, just keep in your mind that the people who are out to get you are also doing their own things. And maybe they're going bowling too. But like the world doesn't stop. And I think that's also part of what makes D&D exciting as a format versus video games, is that you could screw around in a video game and the villain's going to stay at the
Yeah.
spot where you fight them, right? Um I don't think that was related to your original question at all.
Oh no,
What
don't
was
worry
your original
about it.
question?
I believe the original question was, "What experience have your players had with D&D so far?"
Yeah, that's not even remotely close.
No,
But
it's good.
yeah,
It's good.
that's how I will conclude that statement.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to end with that question. Yeah, that's a yeah. I mean, like, cause like I said, that's the beauty. Sometimes you need a beach episode. Like
Yeah,
every,
absolutely.
every once in a while, you're just. I know personally, I have a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I did not make a sheet for this Pokemon whatsoever, so this is probably what it would be.
I have to issue like an explanation slash apology to a lot of fans. The podcast will always be free as per the cease and desist scariness.
Mhm.
Like absolutely will just always be free. But there is a bonus Patreon for people who want like extra content or just like behind the scenes stuff. And one of those perks is that you get to create NPCs. And sometimes I feel kind of bad because someone will put a lot of work into an NPC, and I'll introduce them to the podcast, and the Paco just doesn't care. They just
Mhm.
like, cool, not interacting. And I'm not the one, like it's not my position as the DM to say, oh no, like someone like really wants you to interact with them, so you have to. It's like, no, that's not the story. So I guess I kind of have to issue that apology, that, and I guess the disclaimer that like
Yeah.
please submit characters, but like if the Paco isn't interested, then that's really out of my control. And if
Yeah.
anything that gives your NPC honestly a little more charm. The
So,
fact that they're a mystery.
such is D&D.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
will say though, there is. I'm not even 100% sure why. Maybe it was just because my brain randomly kicking in for one specific moment. But I do remember one specific custom NPC you put in, and it was during the, again, spoilers, the Deoxys fight, the person with
Yeah.
the Rev room. That's the
Yeah,
one
yeah,
that for no reason just stuck out to me. So whoever
yeah.
made an NPC with the Rev room, you're welcome.
Hey, they
I remembered you.
participated. Yeah. No, they pitched it in the combat, and who knows, maybe they'll come back.
Yeah. Ooh. The, when Deoxys gets freed, and then, oh no, the savior.
The Rev of Room.
Rev room. Awesome. What would you say is your favorite moment so far in the campaign?
Oh,
I'm gonna put you on the
man.
spot.
No, I mean, there's a few, and they're all mostly they're dramatic ones, and then sometimes they're just silly ones. One of my favorite moments is the gun. It was a bit of a controversial thing for some listeners. I stand by it. You're rummaging through a villain's warehouse. Guns are canon in the anime. There's a banned episode in the US because Ash goes to the Safari Zone, catches 30 Tauros. Every subsequent episode in Oak's Lab, you see 30 Tauros. And
no one knows why.
No one knows why. In that episode, the sheriff points a gun at him. So guns are canon, for one. And for two, the rummaging around in like an abandoned evil person hideout. Like, it kind of makes sense. In my headcanon, and of course everyone has their own headcanon, I think like guns and ammunition like could work in a Pokemon world, but you have magical monsters, so like it's not really like a high priority, right? Because like
exactly,
like it's the investment of learning to handle a firearm is nowhere near as bountiful as becoming a powerful trainer, right?
100%.
So it makes sense that a villain would have one just for quick and easy, like give me all your money, right? Like it's just so. Anyways, introducing that to the party and have the way that they've interacted with it and dealt with it, and how it's just burning the hole in the party's bag. It's just, I love it. That's fantastic. I think, let's see, another favorite moment. I can't rank it as my number one favorite because it wasn't really had nothing to do with the party. But that natural one that I described that removed Symmetra from the campaign was just really crazy. It was just really, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I was rolling for the NPCs. I was like, all right, this one's for this character, this one's for Sam, and I was like, oh, well, that was really special, but that wasn't the party. I think. I hate to say it. I again, I'm really not picking favorites. I love all my players, but I think my next two favorite moments are both Schmidt. He's had so much cool growth and development. There was a moment, speaking of his development, where Schmidt was really frustrated with the party and the experience. I don't think Jacob was having that bad of a time, but like nothing was going well for Schmidt. So he took a step away. He's like, my character wants to go home to Johto. So he's going to stop messing around with the party and advance that goal as much as possible. And he did that. And, it was the flying trainer challenging the electric gym. It didn't go well. And it just, there was no strategy going into it, which he had to have. And maybe the party could have helped him, And I wasn't going to tell him like, no, you have to work with the party because like he can just figure it out the hard way. Right. After that failed challenge, which he was humbled by, he rejoined the party and grew as a character. And when he came back to do it again, he had a sick strategy that totally caught me off guard. He taught his Skarmory spikes after he realized that the gimmick of the gym was that Volt Switch would constantly happen. So with the constant switching, he just obliterated the gym. It was like really, really cool. And I was really impressed. I was like, that was such a unique combination of roleplay, character development, and like breaking the game's mechanics in like a really cool way. I remember someone reached out to me and they're like, "Oh, you must have been so mad that like he beat the gym so bad." I was like, "What are you talking about? That was like one of my favorite sessions I've ever run." I'm not like an antagonist to the players. I'm telling a story with them, and to have a kind of comeback that wasn't just as like a personal growth thing, but like it spoke to the growth of Schmidt and Jacob. It was just so cool. That was a really top one.
Because I mean,
and
like,
just one.
I was just gonna interject that, like, it's about that comment. Like, like we're not necessarily mad that kind of thing would happen because obviously, you're creating the antagonists and road bumps and problems for the players.
Right.
But at the end, if they don't succeed, they don't see the rest of the story that you wrote or any plans that you have. So, and they're your friends, so you're kind of wanting them to succeed, but not obviously hand it on a silver platter. You're encouraging them to make decisions like that.
Yeah, I want to introduce challenges, not roadblocks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then I think another, there's plenty of moments that I love, but the other one that comes to mind with Schmidt is we spoke briefly about, you know, some we haven't always had all the players for the campaign. And it was really perfect timing that, again, Schmidt, who in the first 10 sessions, you'd be like, wow, he's a selfish asshole. Because that's what he is. It's true. But right before he's removed for a while due to real life things, he makes a super heroic action to help a child who he hates children. And again, just this character development, I'm like, this is so good. So I promise I don't just like Schmidt, but I think those two things like really stand out to me as like, wow, what a good story, and like what a good like role playing. I'm just so like,
what a good time to be hospitalized.
Yeah. Jacob thankfully was not actually hospitalized, but it worked out like really well with the plot. So like I'm really not upset. I know people were scared that he wasn't coming back, but he's back now, and
everything's all peachy.
Everything's all peachy.
I mean, they're still kind of in debt, but you know, it's fine.
It just adds plot intrigue. I want to say one more time, I do love all the characters, and they've all had plenty of their own growth, but
of course,
I think those moments just really stand out to me.
100%. It's always the fun moments, like I know specific. Again, it's hard for me to like be like, oh, what was the professional blah 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 blah, or like, what were they thinking when this happened? But I know personally, I think one of my favorite parts from the campaign was when they're all just like in jail, and the things that happened from that, just them eating cake and vomiting, or identity theft. You know, it's just a multitude of amazing occurrences.
Yeah, you know, that was actually, if we're talking about favorite moments again, that whole Elodie arc was like really special, because Elodie's always been kind of innocent, like, and like the healer kind of support of the party. But I thought that like that little arc that she took really spoke in my mind to like what the fairy type represents, which is play and whimsy and like support, but also there's like trickery. There's like some deception in there, you know, and like some selfish deception.
Yeah,
and just like it was cool. Like it was like, oh, Elodie is a fairy trainer. It was neat. That was a really neat part too.
Yeah, so many fun moments that have stemmed out from that.
I think so. Yeah.
I guess kind of a random question. How, you know, like you said, we're pushing on about 3 years the podcast. How much longer do you think this is going to go before the Quacko Packo sings its last Elodie's party time?
Yeah. Granted that they make it to the end of the plot, I'm estimating approximately episode 100. I think it'll line up pretty nicely. Huh. Yep, we just released 77 today, so that's kind of coming up. I think it might surprise some people. But I don't know when you'll release this, but yeah, in my mind, that's approximately where. I mean, knowing the Packo, it's probably gonna take a little bit longer, maybe like 115 or something. But I think the podcast will end in this calendar year, which is kind of sad to say. But I think that is it for the Quacko Packo. Probably. It's definitely not something I want to run into the ground, but just the truth of the matter is that the plot that I've laid out is starting to wrap up. Their characters have grown a lot with like their character development. Their Pokemon are really powerful. Their original goal was to get 6 gym badges. They have 5. I mean, I think it's happening.
It's all moving. It's that is sad to hear that it's almost over.
I mean, almost is still going to take at least 6
months.
That's
true, but, yeah, but you know, it's on the horizon.
It is, yeah, it's coming up, yeah.
It's hard because, like, I mean, hopefully this doesn't like date it too much of like, wow, it's old or whatever. But like, I would, because granted, I was just in high school like a year or 2 ago, so like, I would that's pretty much my drive-in to school every single day. And drive back was just, all right, it's Tuesday. Let's see let's see what happens.
Oh, that's so cool.
Just me like like screaming in the air when something bad would happen. So if someone was in the car, thankfully they weren't. They would just be like, "What is wrong with you?" Like, don't worry about it. Fine.
The players and I have definitely been talking about this. It's been on our mind. We're like, man, we've been having so much fun, but like, it would be lame if it went on forever. You know, like, it has to conclude. It's like, it's gotta wrap up. And we were talking about it, and Dungeons and Daddies has a lot of influence on my DMing style, and Boarding Party does too. But I never finished. But I know their campaign just ended. But Dungeons and Daddies, there at the end of their first campaign, they had an epilogue, and just man, like everyone was crying, and I was like, we have to have an epilogue. We're just gonna cry because you're saying goodbye, but like it's such a and hopefully we'll see what happens. But like at the end of a journey of an adventure that is successfully concluded. But we've all just it's not just us who's gonna be crying, because I cried to Dungeons and Daddies too. So like. It's just it's really beautiful, like how connected you can get to characters that only exist materially in people's fan art. Like they really just in everyone's brains, and that's really cool and awesome. And I think speaks to something, not to get too profound, but something about like the primitive human sitting at a campfire and sharing food and telling stories. I think that we're here in the year of our Lord 2024 trying to do that same thing with all this technology, and when it's done so successfully, it's just like it really hits us.
It's a hard thing, but like you said, if anything that goes on for too long, overstay is welcome. It just gets boring. So you definitely have a point there. Like we gotta.
I don't want to disservice the Paco by asking them to be around for more than they're due, because I just don't think that's fair.
Exactly.
So,
but with every end does come a new beginning in some shape or form, which kind of leads me to my next question, which is, after it ends, do you think there'll be any more campaigns similar from the Calyrex Game Corner?
There have been discussions, and this will be my shortest answer of this interview.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Get a little breather.
And I respect you, but I will just say there has been discussions.
Okay, that's completely fine. I wrote that in there. I was just like, it'd be an interesting one to ask, but like obviously that's way too far away. So there's no way to. It's like if you're just like, actually yes, and here are 3 that we have lined up with the exact storyline.
No, nothing like that. I will say, whatever the decision is, it will be clear.
Yeah. Okay.
If when the podcast concludes, you will know if there is something else on the horizon.
That makes sense. Another quick question, kind of a little bit related to what we talked about. Where did the idea for the Calyrex Game Corner come from?
Yeah, we haven't talked about that much, but it might be confusing for some listeners.
Yeah.
Calyrex Game Corner is really a Discord server.
Yeah.
But it's a community of primarily Pokemon fans. That's really what started it. I will describe it in detail for you. The year is 2020.
Oh, let's go.
The COVID pandemic is a major thing, and people are picking up new hobbies and doing new things. I, a Pokemon fan and a competitive person, gets into watching Pokemon VGC, the official competitive format, on Twitch. I end up watching the stream of the commentator Gabby Snyder, the professional play Pokemon commentator, and making a bunch of friends. Among them, CJ, Jacob, Grace, and Melissa. We all are very inspired by Gabby's community and other Twitch streamers in general. And I say, hey, I want to stream VGC because I like playing this game. So I do. I do some Twitch streaming. And I started a Discord server because when you stream on Twitch, you have emotes, and subscribers get access to emotes on Twitch. But if you link your Discord, you can use them on Discord too, which I think is super cool. So it's called like Richie Bond's Friends or something, because my handle is Richie Bond Gaming. Well, the thing is that there's like 10 of us who all did the same thing. we all, it's 2020, we were watching Gabby and we decided we want to stream. So it's like, why do we have 10 Discords with all of the same people in them? It just kind of doesn't make sense. So we had a little community meeting and we were like, this is nonsense. Can we just put everyone, can we just condense into one server? And we discussed whose server should it be, and mine at the time just happened to have like 2 more members than everyone else's. So we're like, all right, we'll use Rich's server, and it's just going to be the community server for all of us who watch Gabby and like VGC. So that's what it was. It was called Richie Bond and Friends for a while, And then once it had enough members, we were like, we should probably rebrand because this isn't really Richibon. This is a community thing. At the time, the Crown Tundra had just come out, the DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and we all thought Calyrex was cool and cute. So we said, yeah, let's make it Calyrex themed. Green's a great color. And then give it a name that relates to Pokemon, which is Game Corner, because of course the Game Corner is an integral aspect to many of the regions. So that's the Calyrex Game Corner. The years went by, the pandemic slowed down, people started working again. Now I think only 2 of the members stream anymore. I told myself in the new year I'd redo the welcome page, and I haven't done that yet. But it's basically diversified off of Twitch. There's YouTube content, there's TikTok content, and of course the big one that we just didn't expect to become so loved was the podcast Dunsparce and Grandpa, which I flagged as the start as Calyrex Game Corner because not like it's an actual brand or anything, but we all came from the server. I wanted to run a Pokemon game, so I invited my friends that I made during the pandemic, and that's that. So now that the podcast has become, orders of magnitude larger than any other projects that we've done, it's the podcast server. But we're not going to call it Dunsparce and Grandpa because it's not honest. It's the Calyrex Game Corner, and it always has been. So people can be a little confused by that name sometimes, but I hope that gives the background to understand why it's called that and why it's run the way it is.
Yeah, that's really cool. It makes a lot of sense. I know I personally I kind of have attributed it, like when I first, listened to the podcast and found the link to the Discord, I kind of just attributed it as that, this is for Dunsparce and Grandpa. But as I kind of got into it and as we've talked a little bit through the server, but it was kind of it became a place for me to also talk about VGC because I was just getting into it as a couple of years ago. And
that you might notice, if you scroll way back in the channels, VGC is the main channel because that's always, and we still have our monthly tournaments and stuff, but now 90% of the users, literally 90% of the users in the server are from the podcast. So
really,
easily. I haven't discussed it much, but I let me guess. Did you start listening in the summer of 2021?
I'm trying to think back because I'm I don't think so. I think I.
Oh, sorry, not 21, 22. That was the year.
22. That is probably closer, actually.
So no, because
maybe a little before, but
the server started in 2020. And then 2022 was when the podcast, Anyways, we'd been doing the podcast for 6 or so months. And just, people talk about content creation, and it's not like the podcast is a career for any of us by any means. But so people talk about skill, people talk about luck. For us, we hope that we're making a fun and engaging podcast, and people tell us we are, and we're having fun. So we know it has to be at least enjoyable. But luck, dude, I don't know. Something in July of that year, Spotify said everyone should see this as their top recommended podcast. And anyone who likes anything nerd adjacent, that's Spotify just made that decree without our consent. And so if anyone peeked at our analytics just for that summer, just a huge increase of listeners just out of nowhere, just because Spotify said so. So most of the people who've joined are from that, and it's really cool and mind-blowing, and we try to forget about how many people listen to the podcast, because when we started it was literally a dozen, right? And we recently passed, I think, on Spotify 500,000 starts.
Really wow. Congratulations.
Really crazy. Thank you. Again, that's just starts. That's not actual regular listeners, but that's people that press the play button, unique individuals that were I want to listen.
You piqued an interest.
Of the size of a major city. So,
dang,
pretty crazy.
To touch on something you kind of mentioned there, so many people who they seek out to be content creators and all this stuff that what they don't understand is that luck can be a good factor. It's not just, you shouldn't necessarily go out and hope for luck and just be I hope everything turns out okay without any kind of plan. But with luck, it was the late Technoblade that I remember mentioned that it most opportunities are created by luck, but it takes skill to actually grasp it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how to put this any other way, so I'm gonna put it bluntly. If your podcast sucks, even if it gets promoted, it's not gonna stick with anyone,
Yeah.
right? So like, um, tons of people, make great content, like really, really good stuff, and then the algorithm just never pushes it.
Exactly.
So that is the luck aspect, but you got to have that good stuff because tons of people make really bad content, and the luck algorithm pushes it, and then they get an audience of children.
We've
which is
definitely
cool
seen
and
that
great for them.
recently.
Yeah,
with
but
some-
like that's so that's the thing too. So like yeah, as long as what you're making is not only like in a high quality thing, but it's like true to the like creator, right? I feel like you can kind of tell when like the passion is there, and you can tell when people are just kind of pandering to an audience that they don't have yet. You know?
Yeah.
I think that there's kind of a distinction there. And again, I don't give business advice. I'm not a professional in this field at all. I'm just sharing observations, and I could totally be wrong, but that's my disclaimer. It's like, yeah, don't quote me on that. That's just my observation.
Writing that down so we have undeniable evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that totally makes sense, and that's awesome. That like, I was trying to think there for while you were talking about that. Like, I'm wondering how it got pushed to me, because I don't know if I fully mentioned it, but I had not listened to any D&D podcasts before Dunsparce and Drampa.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
It just randomly Spotify was like, hey, here's a podcast if you want to listen to it. And it was right at the time where I was like, you know, I was really kind of getting into D&D. So I was like, you know, I want to listen to some more and see how other people are doing it. And here I am, having pretty much only listened to this one, actually. I did start, I didn't finish it, but I started one, I think it's called like Tales from the Stinky Dragon.
I already heard of that one.
I started that one. That one was really good. It's just like, because the thing that sticks out to me about both that like really draws me in is that it really feels personal. That it like what the characters are doing is very reminiscent of what I would be doing as a character, or what my friends do as character, what I've seen, of just like, you know what, I wanna see what weird thing I could do, which is why I love implementing, as I've kind of called it, which is I guess another way, just being pretty lenient, is like anime logic of like, and I've kind of described it as, in the anime, Ash could have a Pokemon use Rock Slide and have Pikachu jump on the rocks and then spike an Iron Tail.
Oh yeah, that stuff's essential.
Yeah, so that's why, and part of that, like I said before, was the Boldor and the thing, Torkoal. That's right.
Yep.
Is just fun stuff like that. I mean, and that's the kind of the hard part, is that like you can't push your players to do that, even if you're like, oh, it'd be so sick if they tried out this kind of combo. But in the end, you know, you can't make them, because then that ruins the fun for them, and that's like,
that's not role playing.
That's not role play.
That's the DM
bring it back
to
the video game example you gave. Like, they don't have any control.
Yep.
That's 100% true. Yeah.
It can be challenging as a DM to remove yourself, but it's always worth it. It's always like, oh, it'd be so cool if they did this, but you just can't.
Just don't do it. Sit back, just watch, and let them go into chaos. I know, and I know I've done it quite a bit, and I'm trying to pull myself back from doing it, of like sharing about my campaign, because it's not about my campaign. People can go listen to that if they want to, because some of it's already out. But I know a big thing that goes into like, you know, let your players just kind of do what they want, and like it kind of build from there, is they did actually ask about something you mentioned about, they're like, if it's anime logic, are the banned episodes allowed? Essentially just being, are there guns? And I said yes, but I'm not telling them when they can get an actual gun.
Gotta keep the suspense high.
Exactly. They have actually, it's probably my favorite moment as like being a DM so far, is currently, in the latest episode that's going to come out whenever, I don't plan this stuff, is they went to this town that's known for just really, really angry people. So like everyone is just, no matter what, they're just pissed off. And there's a selection of weapon shops, and they're kind of based in like, there's attacking weapons, there's defensive weapons, and then there's weapons that help with catching. And that was probably one of my favorite moments, is getting to design some stuff. And there was some simplistic stuff I had, like, oh, it's a giant scythe made of like harvest scyther arms or stuff like that. But I think my favorite was a weapon I made called the Powder Shot, which is a double barrel shotgun that you take canisters, and if your Pokemon knows powder moves, they can put that into the canisters, and then that can increase your likelihood of them affecting if you just like point blank shoot like poison powder into something. It'll
That's
like
fun.
toxic poison or something.
That's super neat. I like that.
Yeah, I've always loved like little things like that, which I've seen a couple times. Like I think my favorite in Dunsparce would be the Hooper Ring. Just like
Oh yeah,
all of the fun little quirky things that can happen with that. One which, like you said, did kind of change the course of the campaign for a little bit there.
Yeah.
Threw us for a little.
No, yeah, I thought that was neat. Speaking again to like levels of power, I thought it'd be cool to introduce like early on like a really powerful foe, but they wanted to play. You know, I thought that would be a fun boss battle, is something that's way out of their league, but like they aren't looking to kill. You know, just a thing there. And to be honest, I Hoenn is a region that when you play through the game, there's a bit of backtracking, and I just wanted to give the party fast travel. Honestly. With
like,
the caveat,
you're gonna need this.
just like Fly, is that they have to, have been there before and they have to imagine it, right? So,
yeah.
Little did I know that, it would derail the campaign for about 20 episodes.
But it's fun. It's all the content.
It's great. Yeah.
It's all the Well, this has been a really fun conversation. We're pushing, I think, like an hour and a half as I've been like monitoring here. Thank you so much for coming on this episode, Rich.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great. I'm always happy to answer questions about the podcast.
No problem. I mean, obviously, I kind of wish this could have happened like during the 24-hour stream, but you know what?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. Like that whole thing was a mess anyway. You're probably better off not being there. It would have been.
Okay, yeah,
It would have been me like completely tired of everything, asking these questions. So
sure.
That's not fun.
I'm glad we got around to it eventually, and scheduling is the BBEG for sure.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been fun, and I'm glad that we could have this interview as the first episode of Look Mom Made a Podcast. Woo! The celebration.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess where can they find you? It's not like we've discussed this already before, but
the end is the place for it for sure. All of the podcast stuff is on the Linktree. That's linktr.ee/Dunsparce. Linktree/Dunsparce. You got to have some sort of link host, right?
Of course.
The podcast is called Dunsparce and Drampa. That's with an ampersand. You can find it on pretty much every podcast host service, as well as YouTube. Some people like to listen on YouTube. It's just a blank video, but if you want to listen on YouTube, go for it. And I guess my personal Twitter is Richibon Gaming, but viewers beware, I'm shit posting there a lot. So if you see something that just doesn't feel right for the podcast, just ignore it. It's fine. And yeah, that's my plug. Thanks for letting me do it.
That's awesome. No problem. Well, you gotta have proper what's the word, credit here, or else
yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Sure.
And if you want to check out me, I'm somewhere, I guarantee. Probably. You can. I don't have a link tree, but I probably should. We have obviously this podcast you're listening to. We also have Deoxys Ex Machina, the Pokemon campaign, as a part of our Doc After Dark D&D compilation kind of thing. And then you can check me out on YouTube too, Doc Fusion, where I do things occasionally, but usually it's just less than a minute memes lately, and for some reason people like that, so that's what I'm doing there. The podcast is also there as well. So yeah,
you might benefit from a link aggregate site, or
I
just
might.
a custom website.
I'll just share a Google Doc with everyone that has all the links on it.
Yeah,
amazing.
Go to my personal Google Doc for all my links. That's sick. I love that.
Here's my Drive share link. I hope you enjoy.
That might be no, that's fire.
That's how you stand out. That's
That's true.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and go listen to Dunsparce and Drampa because it is awesome. And if you're a fan of Pokemon or D&D or Chaos, you know what, that's for you. They got some fun stuff.
What a glowing endorsement! I appreciate it.
Of course. You got to speak to the specific audience.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Doc. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you all so much for listening to this first episode of Look Mom, I Made a Podcast, and honestly, I can't think of a better guest to have for my first episode. Richie Bond is just such an amazing and just such a genuine person, and I'm so glad that I got to have him on, because hearing his story, it's the classic tale, I guess you could say, of wanting to create content since you were young and share with the world, and maybe eventually someone will pick up with it and relate. And that seems to have happened finally. And hearing his story go from a Discord server of just a few friends to share jokes with back and forth to now amassing this such a large community of fans of both Pokemon, D&D, and everything in between, to share their love and their passion and to make new friends and to discuss the content that Richie is making himself with his friends, that he's had this opportunity. And obviously, like he said, this isn't a career for any of them, but it's nice to see. I know for a fact that it's always nice to see a hobby or something you put so much passion into reach such an amazing level of success and appreciation. So I truly wish him the best of luck. And due to us talking about it and me realizing I probably should, I have a link tree now. So if you visit link.tr/DocFusion, that's link.tr/DocFusion, you'll find links to my Discord and links to my Pokemon podcast that I'm doing right now, as well as my YouTube channel. And you'll probably see a link for this one eventually by the time you're listening to this. So please go check it out. Check out my other content. And yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Richie Bond. Thank you, just everyone. And yeah, hope you have a great day. And stay safe. Don't get pulled over.